sister.
Hey guys, I was gonna release this sooner, but I got a little distracted by some international events happening right now, so I humbly apologize for waiting this long. I'll try to get better about that. But anywho, Westerns, they're pretty cool, right? But no, seriously, Westerns are some of the most interesting stories in cinema to this day. It's easy to think they're all the same or that it's a dead genre, but if you're asking this destroyer of worlds, that isn't at all the case. Every few years, it seems we're gifted with a Western that introduces us to new and interesting characters, pushes the boundaries of what the genre can bring, sparks our imagination, and makes us glorify those simpler days when the western half of the United States was all very new. Indian tribes and buffalo still roamed the land, and the only thing that could defend you out there was your ingenuity, your weapon, and your grit. Which brings me along nicely to one of my favorite westerns, True Grit, directed by the Coen Brothers. A story about a young woman named Maddie, who after her father has been killed by a man named Tom Chaney, has fled into Indian territory and thrown in with another outlaw by the name of Ned Pepper. Maddie hires a cantankerous US Marshal named Rooster Cogburn to go out, find the man, and bring him back to Fort Smith, Arkansas to answer for his crimes. Shortly after, she learns that a Texas Ranger by the name of LaBeef is also in search of Chaney. So Rooster teams up with LaBeef and they set out on their adventure, but Maddie is determined to go along with them. Through squabbles, banter, separations, and reassemblies, they learn a thing or two about each other and learn to find a kindred fondness for each other, all centered around the goal of finding these men and bringing them to justice. If I've been aptly vague on the plot details, it's because I truly want you all watching to experience this movie for yourselves and why it's so good. And there will be some spoilers going for us, so unless you just like to hear me ramble on, I suggest you turn this off and turn on Netflix and watch this mesmerizing, delectable, and gun-ho piece of filmmaking. Now, I don't read no books. They're not my thing, so keep in mind I have no idea how the original novel written by Charles Portis plays out. I'm going solely off these two films, both worthy of a watch, with the 1969 version winning John Wayne an Oscar and the 2010 version being nominated for 10. However, it's important to remember they're both very different in execution, even if they have very similar plots. There are many notable differences between the 1969 film and the 2010 film. Let's tackle tone first. The first one has a very Saturday movie night with the family vibe, with its upbeat score, bright vibrant color palette, as well as a happy ending to cap it all off, without leaving a single person feeling contemplative or musive, as opposed to the 2010 film, which has a very dry tone. Its color palette not nearly as vibrant, and leaves you with a very thoughtful takeaway about your own choices in life and what it takes to achieve what you desire, and what that may cost you. There's no riding off into the sunset, it's all very thought-provoking and provocative towards typical Western tropes, but I assume that's par for the course with revisionist Westerns. In the 2010 film, we never for a moment forget that Maddie, played by Hailee Steinfeld, is our protagonist. Not only due to her voiceover in the beginning and at the end of the film, but also due to her drive throughout the movie. The plot is always focused around her as opposed to the 1969 film, where you have some scenes focusing on Rooster and LaBeef outside of Maddie. Maddie is a very no-nonsense, straightforward, and intelligent young woman who's able to negotiate her way through almost any situation, often using her lawyer as a weapon until she's thrown into Indian territory, where she begins to understand she's not in her element. She's away from civilization and away from her lawyer's reach. I personally prefer Hailee Steinfeld's portrayal of Maddie more, not only because we get less of, well, this.
Hey, listen, this has given me a plan. When we locate Chaney, we can jump him in the same way, hit him on the head with sticks and knock him inside.
Plus another $100.
Well, there's a posse of officers got me killed in a fight. You think you can cheat me? You're mistaken. You've not heard the last of Maddie Ross. You may well hear from my lawyer, Daggett.
I prefer cash.
But also because she has an understandable, sympathetic nature to her. There's never a moment where I forget this is a young woman who recently lost her father and is trying to do everything in her power to make sure Tom Chaney answers for his crimes. Not only is she the one who sets up this expedition, she's also the one who tries to hold it together when things begin to fall apart. Whereas with Kim Darby's portrayal, there's very little room for her to shine, as John Wayne's performance greatly outshines hers. Which brings me along nicely to my next topic. John fucking Wayne! This man is such a powerhouse in the 1969 film, it's hard not to admire any and every little action he takes.
The leg hurts.
I'll bet it do, sonny boy. Now you just sit right still so it won't bleed so bad.
After all, no one can play John Wayne like John Wayne. The behind the scenes for the 2010 film must have had a few casting days filled with headaches just trying to find someone who could capture the toughness, confidence, and grit that this man alone brings to the screen. However, I think they made the right choice with Jeff Bridges. They're both very much the same character, but through the tones of the 2010 movie, Rooster is presented as a well past his prime marshal, whose reputation is great, yet has a low-key, drunken demeanor that could easily turn someone away from their employ. Nonetheless, he shows his quality when times get tough and he has to be tougher, never hesitating to blow someone away, face on 4 outlaws at once, or carry a dying Maddie as far as he can for help. He does what's right because it's what's right, and that's the only reason he needs. He also drinks enough to give this confident connoisseur of classic cinema a run for his money, so there's that. LaBeef is a Texas Ranger who has been hunting Chaney for 3 months and is naturally fixated on bringing him back to Texas to answer for the crimes he committed there. I always thought Matt Damon was an excellent casting choice for this character. Maybe my eyes are deceiving me, but he kind of looks like Glenn Campbell in a certain light. LaBeef is egocentric, proud, and likely in over his head. However, he's never treated disrespectfully, receiving punishments for faulty steps, while also showing respect and admiration towards Maddie once he accepts the trail's gone cold. He, much like Rooster, is given the opportunities to prove his quality and valor through this expedition, by not only saving Maddie, but also Rooster. Josh Brolin plays Tom Chaney, the man responsible for all of this, and he's quite alright. He's not in the movie much, and there's not much to his character rather than being a drunken baboon who's caused so much damage to this girl's life and thinks he can get away scot-free. Lucky Ned Pepper is played by Barry Pepper.
Coincidence? I think not!
And much like Tom Chaney, he's not that big of a character, both serving more as plot points and end goals for our characters rather than being deep characters with backstories, motivations, or drives, other than escaping from the law, of course. It's a real shame this movie's version doesn't live up to Robert Duvall's portrayal, but then again, it's Robert Duvall. However, I do think this version is adequate and doesn't take me out of the portrayal. If anything, I feel bad for the guy, both versions. He seems like a guy who got wrapped up into somebody else's story and troubles and now has to deal with a mess. It's not too hard to look at this as a generic 2010s Western, especially with the way the trailer portrays this movie. However, I feel where this movie really shines is with its sympathetic protagonists. They're not the most fleshed out, they're not ogres with layers upon layers behind them, they're just people set out to do what they need to do, and this movie executes them extremely well. It's always better to have simple characters done extremely well than complex ones executed poorly. Now let's change course and talk about some of the moments I prefer from the 1969 film as opposed to this one. I feel like this scene with the licensed auctioneer is handled much better in this version as opposed to the 2010 film. I really like Kim Darby's acting in this scene, more specifically this line.
My father bought those ponies for breeding. Now I've looked at them and they're all geldings. You cannot breed geldings.
This line actually gives us a reason why Maddie's family can't use the ponies as opposed to why they just don't need them anymore. Oh, this line is also really badass and should have made it into the 2010 version.
And I will take it up with mine, Lord Dagnett. And he will make money, and I will make money, and your lawyer will make money. And you, Mr. Likeson's auctioneer, you will foot the bill.
Also, where's the big-ass fairy from the 1969 version? I also prefer how Ned Pepper gets away in the scene as opposed to his literal plot armor in the 2010 version, because Rooster for some reason doesn't shoot him. Like, shoot him, he's right there. No, why are you aiming at this guy? Your man is right there, just shoot. But aside from a few instances of plot armor or plot contrivances, True Grit is really good. Like, damn good. It may even enter into great territory. Yeah, it can be slow and prioritizes setup of the events that transpire, but it's entirely to the film's benefit. This movie isn't a deep reflection on the human condition, nor an old-fashioned gunslinging Western adventure, rather than a meet in the middle. It shows you something glorifying whilst asking you, what was it worth? Was what you desired what you needed, and were those demons worth chasing after all? This movie is a solid example to the contrary that remakes are poor. It's a somber, mature take on one of my favorite carefree Westerns, and quite frankly, I much prefer it this way, even if both have their respected tones and values. The Coen Brothers sure as shit knew what they were tackling, and even though I don't read no books, I don't think it would be too far off to say this is more in line with the tone of the novel. The setting is glorious, never romanticizing the Old West, but also not being afraid to show some gunslinger action and fun through it all. This movie shows us a dry and melancholy take of this story, making sense since it takes place in the winter, making it synonymous with the overall tone of the story, as opposed to the 1969 film where it always looks like it's taking place during springtime. The story can definitely lag, however, every scene leads to the next. There's never a scene that could have been taken out because it doesn't add anything. They find the hung body and drop it so they can give it to the Indian, who gives it to Forrester, who gives them the location of the cabin alongside the river. See, that's what we call story progression! Even if it seems like very little is happening. Some may say it's contrived that these events happen as they do, however, I don't fucking care since it makes sense that there wouldn't be too many people out here anyways, and the ones that would definitely be trotting down similar trails as they are. Westerns are so fucking cool, guys. They have some of the best examples of heroes we may ever find. They're not super soldiers defending the world from monolithic titans. They're not fabulous demigods blessed by Olympus to achieve success. They're more than not faulty, brash, haunted, or well past their prime sheriffs, vagabonds, or freemen. From William Money, Harmonica, Django Freeman, or Rooster Cogburn. These characters add to America's mythology of times long past and how hard men face hard times and have to make hard choices in the face of death, corruption, or insurmountable odds. So, yeah, you should check it out, cause I really like True Grit, and I think you will too. I haven't figured out how to properly end videos yet, so I shall make like LaBeef and ride off with a simple adios.